Well, I mean, that's the sad thing that's always surrounded jazz is that it's united the musician
Yeah.
and then had, maybe other people in the media or the record business want to break that up to capitalize on it. And I think, like I said before, it would be easier commercially to say, well, Charlie Christian was the only person that was jamming at Mittens, the only one that was changing the music.
Yeah.
You see, because not only was he African American, he was a black guy, but he also died so young.
Yeah.
And he
did.
fits that tragic, romantic thing that the record company likes to sell, the history likes to sell, that sells the books. You know what I mean? And I think that
Yeah,
when I heard that
yeah.
recording of you playing just those couple of bars, I was like, something went off in my brain. Like, wow, this is something that this is a direction that I never heard before. And the fact that you were using like a whole tone sound and playing it the way you did, that was rhythmically sort of similar, sounded like something you might have heard Monk play,
No,
or sounded like something that you might have heard.
it's what I heard up in Harlem and
Yeah.
what I grew up playing, and the same way in Chicago and on the
Mhm.
West Coast. No matter what it was, I lived with Art Tatum. I loved Art Tatum. I spent all the times that we could with Louis Armstrong and myself.
Right.
We were very dear friends. Eddie South and I were the first in Chicago to play together with Louis Armstrong. And so
The first.
there was never any barrier.
Right. Not amongst the musicians.
No. When we played New Orleans, Mary and I were in a cab with Nat.
Uh-huh.
And we pulled up in front of the Roosevelt Hotel. And I got out, got Mary out, and I says, "Come on, Nat." And Nat says, "I can't stay here." He says,
Oh, yeah.
"I have to stay on the other end of town because I'm black."
Mm-hmm.
I says, "You're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
What are you kidding?
Right.
What do you mean you can't? You're working here tomorrow night."
Right.
Yeah, he says, "I can work here, but I can't stay here." And that's the way it was.
I mean, I've heard stories that you actually purchased some of these musicians' houses in New Jersey and other places,
Yeah,
and then sold it back because
I did that with Nat Cole, yeah.
because the white people that were selling it or in the neighborhood, they wouldn't take either they just wouldn't sell it to a black man or they wouldn't take them seriously as a buyer. And so I've heard stories that you would actually go and purchase the house and then sell it
Yeah,
to them.
my manager's here now. It's his grandfather
Oh,
who
okay.
was my manager then.
Oh, wow.
Bronstein, Phil Bronstein.
Uh-huh.
And Phil says, "I want you to do me a favor."
Mhm.
He says, "I want to buy a penthouse here in New York, but I want you to sign for it and everything, and then turn it over to Nat."
Oh, I see.
See, and what we did is that I bought the apartment and
Right.
then gave it over to Nat.
Right.
And when they did that, they never finished the apartment.
Oh my! When
And
they found
that's-
out that
that's-
he was
they
living
found out that he was black and he's not going to be in there, and
Mhm.
that was the end of that.
Wow.
And that's something I haven't even told his grandson. I haven't told him this story.
Wow.
But these are things that you just happen to remind me of it, and yes, that's true.
Yeah. I mean that's
true.
that's very progressive.
Well,
I mean, at that time, do you feel like maybe you were taking a little bit of a risk?
no.
I mean, I know that you were doing it out of, out of
We're
goodwill. but,
talking
you know.
about you, Michael. We're talking about you.
Oh, talking about me.
Yeah. I just reviewed a story. I won't tell the whole story again, but Phil
Grandpa?
When he won, yes, sure, Grandpa. When he was my manager, he asked me if I would go up there and sign up for him to get an apartment in New York for Nat Cole. And so I did. And when I signed that thing up for Nat Cole, when they found out that Nat was black, what they did is that they just didn't finish the apartment and got him out of there.
What year was that?
Oh, this goes way back.
40s?
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. It was in the late 40s, early 50s. I would say around 1950. In fact, I just talked Glenn Wallace into opening Capitol Records up in New York because it was a West Coast record company, you know.
Wow.
But anyway, as far as jazz is concerned, it hasn't bothered me, but it just sometimes it'll grab me because I say, I know I'm playing jazz,
Right.
and the people like it. The only thing I do different than what the other guy does is if I feel as though that tune deserves the melody.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if you're playing It Had to Be You, you know, I go, you know, I can play that just as well as the next guy.
Right.
And then now you're jazz, okay?
Right.
Or you can play It Had to Be You,
Right.
okay? Now it's commercial jazz,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go right down to Eddie Duchin or something like that, and then you're playing just plain commercial.
Right.
Okay, now the fellow that taught me so much was when I got into the big time,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm making records with Bing Crosby, and I'm making Dick Haymes, and the Andrews Sisters, and everybody else. When I'm with these people have been trained to sell a record
Right.
and become famous.
Right.
And when you want to do that, and you're going to work with Bing Crosby, this was what happened to me. Bing asked me if I'd come over and make a record with him.
Right.
I said, sure. And I went over there, and we run the record down, run the song down to make the record. And he looked at me, and he says, little busy, aren't we?
Subtle.
That's a subtle way of saying,
Right.
you know, calm down, kid.
Right. Right.
Easy does it now.
Less is more.
We want to sell this record, and kiss me once and kiss me twice. Now I can go in there and bum bum, bum, you know, I go a million ways of getting far out.
Right. Right.
Far out, but you don't make any money.
Yeah, I noticed in my own music adventures that the more notes that you play, the less you get paid. You don't get paid by the note.
You don't get paid by the
So, you know, there's a good saying for that. You get paid by the less. It's funny because it almost seems like the everything, pop music has to be cut down to the lowest common denominator to sell. You know, so the simpler it is and the less music, you know, sometimes that these artists know, the better they sell.
Well, sometimes
Yeah.
they think of it as prostitution. Sometimes they think of it. Miles Davis said to me one day, we're both coming out at Columbia.
Right.
And I happened to be doing Suspense at Columbia, and he was doing a recording date. And he was on Columbia, and he had just knocked off a bottle of whiskey,
Oh.
and he says, hey, I want to ask you something, Les. He says, how come you got 7 of the 10 records? On the top 10, 7 of them are yours, and I'm not on there at all. And he says, why?
Oh.
And I says, well, I think it's very simple. I says, all you've got to do is make Mockingbird Hill and you'll be number one.
Right, right.
He says, I wouldn't be caught dead playing Mockingbird Hill. But this is, I was only joking with him, but you have to think commercial if you want to make money. And that's what it's all about.
You have to remember the business.
Yes, that goes. How did Crosby get to be so enormous, and how did Sinatra become so enormous?
Mm-hmm.
And these people become enormous because they give the people what they wanted to hear.
Right. Well, it's a simple equation, right? You give them what they
Nothing.
want, and then they give you their money.
That's right, and that goes for in a nightclub.
Right.
When you're playing in a nightclub is empty and it's the greatest music you ever heard.
Right. It's true.
And then when you want to hear the commercial music, which is also good,
Right.
it's also good, but more people can understand it. More people buy that record, or they buy a drink, or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it works.
So do you need Les back? Okay. So the last thing I wanted to do, well, first of all, I wanted to thank you for
Oh, you're welcome.
giving me this hour of your time and telling these great stories. And hopefully this interview, when it gets out there, will help your reputation on the jazz end of things. Because, you know,
At my age, it doesn't make any difference.
well, but, you know, I mean, every little bit helps, at least as far as from a historical perspective.
Well,
people know.
Leonard Feather says that Paul Leslie is better than Les Paul.
And now we know who Paul Leslie is. So,
And Shorty Nadine.
and Shorty Nadine. So the truth is out
Yeah.
after so many years. But I wanted to thank you for taking your time, and I also wanted to see if you could do a favor for my program director and record a short sting. Just right now, you could say, "Hi, this is Les Paul. You're listening to WP 88.7 FM."
WP what?
88.7 FM.
You just said it.
No, but
This is Les Paul.
no, he wants you to say it. They don't care if I say it.
Well, now we're saying it together.
Okay. But yeah. So well, actually, you can just say, "This is Les Paul," and I'll do the rest.
All right. Hi, this is Les Paul, and you're listening to
WP 88.7 FM.
Right On.
Right on. All right. It's been very fun. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
And I'll let you off the